What's happening, folks? In today's video I'm gonna do kind of an unfair comparison. I have some cameras that don't necessarily compare exactly to each other. They do different things, but I'm gonna compare them for image quality, I guess, because why not? Sometimes people are interested in two very different cameras for a fairly similar job. I'm going to compare the X-Pro2 with the kit lens set to 23mm to the X100V, which is 23mm as standard. And to make it fair, I'm going to set both the lenses to f8, because otherwise we could go through so many different apertures and make it all complex. I'm just going to do this fairly basic thing. We're going to do f8, see how sharp it is, kind of middle of the road aperture. I went out and I shot some photos just around a few blocks from my house basically, and tried to get a range of colours in there, and also different ISOs and different light situations, so we can take a look. One thing I did forget to do was set the white balance to be identical. I had them both on auto, so what I'm going to do is just set it all to daylight, so it all has the same like Adobe Lightroom daylight settings. That way the colours and the sort of tones of it will match. Okay, so let's start with this. By the way, none of these pictures are going to be particularly impressive. They're just some pictures I took when I was cycling to the post office. However, it'll give us some sort of an idea about how the images look in comparison to each other. So on the left we have the X100V, on the right we have the X-T2. Future Liam here. I just want to note that throughout this video I referred to the X100V versus an X-T2. It was not, it was an X100V versus an X-Pro2. I just want to clear that up. Image quality should be identical with X-Pro and X-T anyways, so technically it kind of is, but I was using an X-Pro2. So back to the video. And right off the bat, I can notice that the X100V on the left is much more green, I would say, than the X-T2 on the right. The X-T2 looks a little more pink. And in this case, the one that I think looked more like real life is the X-T2. It is how I sort of remember that scene looking, whereas the X100V sort of is almost a little darker as well. I think maybe it has somehow, maybe it meters slightly different. Well, it doesn't matter how it meters because they were at the same settings, so maybe the lens is actually a little darker than the X-T2 is at that same setting. So if we go into 100%, round about the middle here, I can see sharpness. I've turned the sharpness on Lightroom down to 0, so I've removed that from affecting the raw file. So this should just be Lightroom's interpretation of the raw files without any changes made to them. And I mean, these both are very sharp looking. I would even hazard a guess to say that the X-T2 with the kit lens at 23mm at f8 is slightly sharper, maybe. It might just be how I'm looking at it. But the shadows look smoother on the X100V than they do in the X-T2. I think the X100V also looks like it's zoomed in a little more, and that could be because of the couple of extra megapixels that it has. Alright, let's go somewhere where there's more detail. Go down to this lamppost. Yeah, I mean the sharpness is pretty comparable. I still want to say there's more detail with the X-T2. Neither of these really look soft at f8 at this distance. It's great. I think we should move on to the next picture because this isn't giving me anything more. Okay, on the left is the X100, on the right is the X-T2. I screwed it up. I've got the ISO different. It's 160 on the X100 and 400 on the X-T2, and obviously the shutter speed's different. I screwed that up. I guess I forgot to fix that. Hopefully the rest of them don't turn out like that. This is not supposed to be a fair comparison anyways. I'm just looking at these images and seeing if there's any significant differences compared to each other. Like, none of these are bad cameras, and they're both fit for the purposes that I want to use them for, which is street or just like day-to-day life or travel photography. These are so similar. It is ridiculously similar. A little bit of a tweak in white balance and you would almost never know the difference between these two. This guy's leg hanging out this car. There's plenty of detail in both of these. Okay, so on the left we have the X100. Again, hopefully I fixed the ISOs this time. Oh, I didn't. I messed it up again. I must have thought. I don't know what I thought. However, in this one, we have the X100 on the left, looking a little more green as usual. But this time, I was shooting kind of towards the sun, so this tower thing is backlit. And I would say that the X-T2 has much more contrast. I much prefer the way the X-T2 picture looks here. It's far more contrasty. I can see more like details and stuff. It's not as washed out. I think I even did still have the lens hood on the X100 on this, but not on the X-T2. Right, another picture. Okay, X100 on the left, still got that green tint to it. ISO 320 this time. I still got the X-T2 on 400. Alright, I really messed this up, so this is definitely nowhere near a fair comparison. But let's continue. Why not? I've started it now. Details are looking just as good. I'm seeing almost no difference apart from the slight difference in colour. Maybe a bit more saturation from the X-T2 is actually kind of showing up now. Don't really see much like chromatic aberration from the sun on these twigs or anything. These look good. The quality is so similar. Like Fuji did so well to have decent quality out of those crop sensors from their older generation 24 megapixels that I don't think there was much to be gained by going any further. And even here, if anything, I would say, I mean, it's 22.3 millimeters rather than 23, but they're not far off. And I would say there's probably at whatever area this is. Where are we? Yeah, in the corner here. In this particular picture, the X-T2 looks a little bit sharper. And I don't see much difference in distortion between either of these. I don't think there really is much to deal with. Hi. My doorbell just rang, and I could hear kids outside. There was like, I think it was our neighbour's kids. And I went to the door, and there was a little girl holding a calculator, and she was just like, I just wanted to give this to you. And I was like, what happened? Did you find it outside? And she was like, no, my brother didn't want it anymore, so I was going to give it to you. That was new. That's never happened before. A kid just trying to pan a calculator off that she didn't want to a stranger. Back to the video, shall we? Alright, on the left, again, X100V clearly looks much more green and I guess slightly more desaturated than the X-T2. Okay, so up in the corner, pretty good corner sharpness. The X-T2 and the kit lens might be sharper in the corners at 23 millimeters at f8. I don't think the kit lens would hold up throughout its focal range. These are so similar. This is almost starting to feel like a waste of time. Maybe in the bottom here, around the edges, the X-T2 still looks a bit sharper. It could be because I'm focused in a slightly different place, but who knows? There's there's points over here where the sharpness is pretty much identical. I wonder if the X-T2 is focused further back, because the difference there in sharpness is kind of noticeable. That's kind of wild. I mean, both of neither of these are not sharp lenses. These are both really good. But yeah, I think X-T2 might even look a little better. It wouldn't stop me from shooting the X100 by any means, but okay, now we're slightly higher ISO. So I'm at f5, 6400 ISO, 1/60th of a second, and I got the ISO correct on both of these. The settings are the same. Now with the X100 having that slightly more green tint, I would say the greens are a bit darker on the X100. But again, I've been saying this whole time, the X100 seems to shoot slightly darker than the X-T2. And I think the X-T2 therefore has this, like, let's zoom in on this leaf, this marginally brighter, more yellowish looking leaf at the front. I was going to say the X-T2 was sharper, but these are so comparable. Almost no difference here. The grain or noise might be, it depends where I look. You could say it's slightly better, probably, on the X-T2, but then in other areas I look and it kind of looks smoother on the X100. There's little to no difference here. That's, yeah, this is wild. This is way more similar than it's expected it to be. Alright, next one. So you may have noticed by now there's a little bit of dust on the sensor of the X-T2. Doesn't really affect the image that much, but you just sometimes get these annoying spots. I can tell you right now that the X-T2 has more colours. I can see more saturated colours. I can see it in these magenta coloured flowers, which means maybe there's some more detail with the X100 left over, a little bit more sort of like variation in tonality. I mean, who cares really? Like, this isn't going to affect your picture at all. Like this is just, I've never pixel peeped this much on anything to try and find any differences between cameras. Like, these are both great. One shoots a little warmer, but you could probably fix all of that. In fact, you definitely could fix all of that with a little change in white balance if you really hated how it looked on one or the other. Why don't we do almost like a dynamic range test? Start off with the X100. This is on high ISO picture, so let's just go wild with it. Bring that up, bring the highlights down, brighten it up by, I don't know, half a stop or so. Lift the blacks, is that a thing that would be advisable? Why not? Yeah, I did it on both. Let's go back. The X100V looks a little brighter in this case with the same amount of adjustments. So this leads me to believe that technically maybe the dynamic range is slightly better on the X100. But when I look at these like shadow, like the darkest areas of the picture, the X-T2 has more grain at the exact same settings than the X100V, but the X100V has more megapixels, so maybe that makes the grain come across as finer with this like ridiculous amount of adjustment than it does on the X-T2. But again, this is not that big of a difference. This is a very small difference, and I would not feel that I needed to buy the newer version of the Fuji sensor if I had the older version, just based on like dynamic range or sharpness or ability to lift shadows or anything like that. There's not that much of a difference here at all. So I don't know if there's anything more that I can really do to look through these images. I guess I could have tried shooting something at 12,800, but I think we're going to come up with similar sort of results from the 6400 ISO stuff. There's very little difference between these sensors, between these cameras even. So if you have an X-Pro2 and you're thinking, should I get an X100 to upgrade? You probably don't need to. The only thing that makes me want an X100 more than an X-Pro is the mechanical leaf shutter, so it's quiet. But you can get away with using the electronic shutter on the X-Pro. You don't lose any image quality that I'm aware of, but what you do get is if there's something close enough to you or moving fast enough, is you'll get that kind of like digital rolling shutter kind of look, so things can warp a little bit. So, but if you're sitting still and things further away from you, like people are walking at a normal pace, you won't really notice much distortion. In fact, I don't think you'll notice any distortion. There's a whole bunch of my pictures on my Instagram that were shot with the electronic shutter with the X-Pro2, and you can't see any distortion, but I have had it ruin a few pictures before, and that annoys me. So I feel like I'm blabbing a little bit, and I think I've covered everything I need to cover. Ask me some questions down below if I didn't cover something, or if you care enough to know any other differences between these, but either's a good choice. You got to go with the one that fulfills the sort of like the ergonomic needs or wants that you would rather have. Oh, autofocus, that's probably something that people wonder about. They're both good. X100 might be a little bit better in the dark, but I can't really personally notice that much difference. They've both been perfectly good for anything that I've tried to use them for, and when I'm shooting street most of the time I'm at f8 and shooting manual anyways, so it's not that big of a concern to me. And if I've been travelling, the X-Pro2 it's solid, you're fine. Alright, I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. I make new videos every week. Usually it's not videos like this, it's videos when I'm actually out shooting street photography or doing something like that, or making some sort of tip video. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.